I don't like making videos about these topics because it puts me in a position where, especially as somebody that's deeply sympathetic to feminism, I have to discuss things that, I don't want to discuss, especially if I have female viewers that, um, you know, don't really know me very well, and there's not a deep familiarity because this is not what I want to do, and to have these discussions with people I don't know very well, because I know that women usually don't like talking about this kind of thing with strange men that they don't know very well at all. But I saw Wired's article on this, and it went up, and they made some good points about it, in their publication about the JAMA study, and what they said about it, and you know, 100 years ago, they said that masturbating would make you go blind. We've progressed. Today, we're told that watching moderate amount of pornographies will shrink your brain. The, the claim arose courtesy of brain imaging paper published last month in JAMA Psychiatry, a respected medical journal. Well, I mean, I'm about to damage the, yeah, the respect for this journal myself and what I have to say. Among the hyperbolic headlines that followed, my favorite was from a German site: P brain, watching porn will wear out your brain and make it shrivel. Others concluded viewing porn shrieks the brain. From the reliably trustworthy Daily Mail, watching porn linked to less gray matter in the brain from Huffington Post. The study triggered all this concern that was published in the German pair. Simon Kohn, a psychologist, and Jordan Gellert, a psychiatrist. They scanned the brains of 64 healthy men, averaged 29 in 3 ways. Note the word healthy. In fact, all the men who participated were free from any psychiatric or neurological disorders, so if they had shrunken brains, we'll come down to that later, it wasn't causing them any major problems. The first scan was a simple structural brain scan that looked at patterns of brain activation when men viewed neural images. The third scan looked like a brain activity where the men relaxed in the scanner for 5 minutes, a so-called resting state scan. The men answered questions about how much porn they watched. They averaged 4 hours per week, and none of them met the criteria for internet sex addiction, according to the internet sex screening test. Here's what caused all the fuss. The researchers found that hours spent watching porn was negatively correlated with the amount of gray matter in a subcortical brain near the front of the brain, the right striatum that's known to be involved in processing of reward as well as lots of other things. In other words, men who said they spent more time watching porn tended to have a smaller amount of gray matter in this part of the brain. Also, the more avid porn viewers showed less activation in their left striatum when they looked at racy images, and appeared to have reduced connectivity between their right striatum and the left docaudal prefrontal cortex. Does watching porn shrink your brain? The researchers think it probably does. One may be tempted, they wrote, to assume that the frequent brain activation caused by pornography exposure might lead to wearing down and downregulation of the underlying brain structure as well as function. One may be tempted, but one should really know better. You know, the most glaringly obvious problem with the study is, of course, the cross-sectional methodology. It's just as likely that the men with less gray matter in their striatum are more attracted to porn as opposed to porn causing in that brain profile. The researchers know this, causing that brain profile. The researchers know this. It's not clear whether watching porn leads to brain changes or whether people born with certain brain types watch more porn. Kahn told the Daily Telegraph, and yet the paper still ran the headline, "Watching pornography damages men's brain." A further problem with the correlational studies is not just the causal direction that can run either way, but it's unknown or uncontrolled third factor or others could be causally involved. In this case study, the elephant in the room is personality. There could also be elephants in the room that we don't know about. I would also like to add to the Wired post, could be unknown unknowns. Unsurprisingly, personality is linked with media use, including porn consumption and what brain characteristics. Asking men how much porn they want is a crude indicator of their extroversion. Lower conscientiousness and desire for sensation seeking. For instance, men who watch porn in work hours tend to be less conscientious and more impulsive. Last year, a study reported neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and obsessional checking all significantly correlated with a latent measure of compulsive behavior upon which the use of internet pornography also loaded. Amazingly, although Kun, I don't know how to pronounce it, and Galinat, I don't know how to pronounce your names, I'm so sorry, you're very foreign to me, checked their participants were free from depression and addiction. They otherwise failed to measure the participants' personality traits. Mexican with weed whacker outside, sorry. Had they done so, they would likely have found strong associations between personality and brain structure and function. Past research has already shown that high sensation seekers have reduced sensitivity to high arousal pictures. This is really just not striking me as my own profile because I'm extremely sensitive to these type of photos, including nudity and gore. And by the way, gore, gross. Get it away from me. Other researchers have documented differences in resting state brain activity according to personality, since further research has shown how extroverts and those more open to experience are persuaded by advertising that uses sexual imagery. By failing to control or measure by measure or control for personality, the results in this study are virtually meaningless. The men's self-reported time watching porn is little more than a rough proxy for their personality profile, including their willingness to divulge details about their private habits. And we already know that key personality traits such as extroversion and sensation-seeking are linked with distinct patterns of the brain structure and response. By failing to follow up participants over time, the research also provides no evidence that watching porn has any effects whatsoever. Moreover, by neglecting to measure any other media consumption, then if before or after evidence were available, we wouldn't know if it were due to porn consumption or other media activities correlated with porn use, such as watching violent movies and online gambling. Or to be fair, the findings did hold after the researchers controlled for overall levels of internet use. The researchers have witnessed newspapers spread headlines of brain shrinkage, brain harm, and yet they know that they specifically recruited psychologically and neurologically healthy men. In fact, therein lies the only real insightful from the study. Look at it this way. In a survey of 64 men who answered recruitment ads for a brain scanning study, it was found that they viewed an average of 4 hours of porn a week. They did so with no apparent ill consequence. Screening confirmed no psychiatric, medical, or neurological problems. Of course, there's a debate to be had about the merits and harms of porn for individuals and society. This study does not make a helpful contribution. Suggested new headline: watching moderate amounts of porn won't hurt your brain. So they didn't actually come up with evidence that it did that. But my own fuckery to throw at studies like this and to point out that they have flaws. That how is it that Wired well-respected publication missed this aspect of it? I guess it's down to how much the individual authors and contributors know. Since this is a publication that is often you have one writer on a thing, and so I would say, hey, Christian Jarrett, I appreciated your piece, but I think that you're also missing out another methodological flaw. Like I said, I mean there could be unknown unknowns in that that we're just not picking up on to explain for this sort of thing that we wouldn't anticipate to explain these things. And then on top of all that, you've got another problem with all of it, which is just that it was a study of 64 men. To draw conclusions from a study of 64 men is to fall victim to the fallacy of insufficient statistics. You miss the fact that it's still anecdotal. 64 case studies doesn't prove anything. If anything, the only thing it may suggest is that there's a need for further research.